Hi, this is Braden Peterson, and today we'll be talking about using policy to empower whole child success and really the need for policies that support social emotional learning from a governance perspective. Rationale really, from 2003 to 2012, there was a 3% increase in anxiety and depression among adolescents, with 4.4 million suffering from anxiety and almost 2 million from depression in 2016 alone. This really shows a 25% of children were diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, and looking at that, that would be 8 students in a class of 30. And so clearly there are a lot of needs among adolescents in our classrooms. Well, there has been a 370% increase in regards to students reporting levels of anxiety since our COVID-19 spring 2020. 60% of these students are sharing loneliness and isolation as a main contributor to the mental health concerns, and 20 to 40% of students have shown some disengagement at the schools. So we clearly know that there are some mental health concerns. Well, what is social emotional learning? What's that have to do with anything? Well, it really has the umbrella term is kind of consolidated into these 5 core areas. And there's self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision making. And as you can tell, it's more of a Yuri Bronfenbrenner approach here in the ecosystems, that there are certain places that these all come together. And classrooms and schools and communities are all different concentric circles where these play out. Well, the school is a major hub of social interactions, and so as you can imagine, making sure students are well adjusted and connected with one another is an important part in the learning. Well, there are short-term benefits of SEL, and really the research bears out very evidently. Attendance increases, grades will increase, peer connectedness and positive relationships all increase when social emotional learning is part of the curriculum. And on the flip side, the problematic behavior and disruptive activities along with student anxiety all decrease when SEL is part of that curriculum. Well, it also has longer term benefits. It's like wearing a seatbelt. All society benefits from the effects of SEL. There are fewer maladaptive behaviors as children, which really culminates into fewer maladaptive behaviors as adults. There are fewer doctor visits, and research has even shown lower healthcare costs. One research was very interesting in showing that there's really an $11 return for every $1 spent on SEL. So for long-term strategy, it is very much a benefit to have social emotional learning as part of our school structure and system. So why have district-wide policies? Well, it's one thing to have school-based is one area of this, and some teachers are intuitive and naturally gifted in the sense of infusing emotional wellness and well-being into their classrooms. But how do we ensure that all students are impacted by this? Well, SEL is more deeply internalized when there is a systemic coordination across schools, when it's not just a one-off here or there and an isolated lesson, but as it's embedded in part of the work that we do. And policy can support the whole learner and move this SEL initiative from the periphery as just something that's an addition to really become mainstream. So what are district-wide policies? Well, they really examine the importance of adult and student assets. They reflect and appreciate diversity and foster inclusive environments. And as you can imagine, over the last few months, that has very much been on the forefront of conversations as schools contend and continue to build culture. Well, board policies can codify these commitments from school divisions to drive implementation efforts. Instead of trying to be unique in each school, divisions can really come alongside and support some of the equitable educational practices. They can build foundations for developing high quality classroom practices and really implement universal SEL across the district. So how do districts create SEL supportive policies? We're going to briefly touch base on 3 main areas. One is establishing guidelines that support SEL. Another is ensure accountability, and thirdly, promote equitable SEL access for all students, again, so that each student is impacted, much like seatbelts in the society. So the first is establishing guidelines that support SEL. One, at the district level, creating strategic plans that support SEL is one way to really implement that across the spectrum. Also, codifying practices. One example that I pointed out here in the Oakland Unified School District, there were 3 signature practices, and that just became part of who they were. And there was a welcoming ritual, engaging practices, and optimistic closures to really be reflective but forward-looking in a positive way. And by implementing these and codifying them as part of the expectations, they were able to really infuse that into the daily routine of those schools. And thirdly, see here, establish more equitable discipline policies and guidelines. So we really can modify some of the codes of conduct to include restorative practices, really stepping away from any of those zero tolerance policies from the early 90s that we've kind of seen does not have a whole lot of impact. But this is a way to really focus on some restorative practices and include that social emotional learning and interconnectedness that the peer relationships so value and learn from at this stage in life. Secondly, we want to ensure accountability. So how can we do this from a governance perspective is really making sure that the data is there, that we have climate surveys and index indicators, that schools are really supported in understanding what's going on behind just academic assessments and statewide goals. The SIP plan templates can be modified to really underscore these implementations to ensure that every school is implementing them with fidelity. Human resource policies also support the capacity of all educators, so bringing on folks and being sure that the professional development supports the SEL competencies across the board throughout the division. And really, Dee, I wanted to highlight this is tying it to policies that other stakeholders hold dear. Not everyone will be an early adopter of SEL, but ensuring that these policies are tied to things that the sacred cows will certainly help move this forward, again, from the periphery to the mainstream, as we talked earlier. Thirdly, I want to talk about promoting equitable SEL access for all students. Now, from a governance perspective and using this throughout the division, right, there are different opportunities for divisions to plug into. And more states are partnering with the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, CASEL. You see an A there. And that is an opportunity to really pull some resources, and as the name suggests, it's a collaborative that really pulls from the best and brightest across the country and can really partner with some of these equitable practices to ensure access for all. There's a continual PD needed, right, supporting credentialing for SEL competency and encouraging teachers to continue their learning in this area. And then convening state-level task force to identify elements that will support this, along with aligning and leveraging resources from Title I funds and other funds coming from the government. So what is an issue that really holds us back are funding hurdles, right? 2 major hurdles to implementing SEL across the board would be first, a lack of funding, and secondly, districts just not sure how to use it. Well, the good news is there are monies out there, and there's a great federal funding guide that will help kind of support and learn how to use money to support SEL initiatives across the division. And so certainly as boards do the work that they need to do and really kind of look to fund certain initiatives, and superintendents and boards work in a collaborative relationship, there is opportunity for funding. And so looking strategically into how to utilize that to support those 3 main objectives to really support SEL policies across the continuum. Again, helping schools ensure that it's not a one-off and just addition to, but instead it is part of the mainstream and not just periphery.